Inauguration Day 2025. Donald Trump's the president again. I can't help feeling uneasy about this. I've been trying to wrap my head around it ever since the election. Try to prepare myself for all this again. But it still just feels so weird and dystopian, and I can't help thinking this is just a bad day for the country. This is not a political channel. Nobody cares what I have to say, but I feel like I ought to say something. Not that it's going to help anything at this point. Maybe I could have done more to help prevent this, other than staying informed and trying to share my beliefs and opinions with the people around me. I didn't do anything else to help prevent this from happening. And the people around me I did share my thoughts and opinions with already probably shared them anyway. So I can't say that I did anything particularly useful to help prevent this. And it's not really a personal thing with me. I feel like we're going to be fine. My family and I'm sure, are going to be fine through whatever craziness is about to happen for the next 4 years, question mark. I guess I just thought we collectively were moving forward, that we had moved past a lot of this. When Kamala Harris became the nominee, I thought, hey, that's it. We're done. It's in the bag. Trump's done. Trumpism is done. All these horrible people and clowns that seem to pop up all around Donald Trump are going to go back under their rocks, and we're going to be done with this forever, and we're moving on. And obviously, the majority of people who voted did not feel that way. It seems like the people around me, for the most part, who I'm working with or serving or whatever, the people that I come in contact with daily, most, I think, either are not paying attention, don't care, or they're thrilled. And I mean, I hope they're right, you know? I hope you're all right. I would love to eat these words. I hope that we're all better off very soon than we have ever been, and we all live happily ever after. I guess we'll see. I guess there's nothing I can do about it. I've been reading the January 6th report, or the report of the January 6th committee lately, and I didn't plan for this to happen really, but I finished reading the book last night, last full day of the Biden administration. And the epilogue to the book is written by Representative Jamie Raskin from Maryland, and it seemed very appropriate and very timely, and his words just kind of captured everything that I've been thinking and feeling in some degree. So I guess what I want to say is I'm just going to read that, or most of that. So here it is. We Must Fight for Democracy Itself is the title, by Representative Jamie Raskin, Democrat of Maryland. The first line is a quote from Thomas Paine. We have it within our power to begin the world over again. And these are Representative Raskin's words. What now, dear America? Well, the fight of our lives continues, and may this book in your hands become a powerful new weapon for truth in the coming battles to strengthen American democracy and protect American freedom. I take pride in the work of our bipartisan committee and excellent staff, now embodied by this report. After over a year and a half, we were able to pierce the thick, moving fog of quote-unquote big lie propaganda and make plain to America how Donald Trump masterminded and mobilized successive attempts to overthrow the 2020 presidential election and, finally, on January 6, 2021, provoked and unleashed dangerous insurrectionary violence at the United States Capitol, the purpose of which was the undoing of our constitutional order and the seizure of the presidency in a coup. We could have lost it all on that day and been plunged into authoritarianism, mass violence, even civil war. We had some luck on our side at crucial moments, along with extraordinary valor and courage from our police officers and patriotism from a lot of election officials along the way. But we can't count on good luck anymore. What we're facing today is a full-scale frontal assault on democracy. not just in the mob that forced members of the House and Senate, along with the Vice President, to flee running from the joint session, but in the form of more systematic threats to majority rule. Those threats have included massive voter suppression, gerrymandering of state and federal legislative districts, the use of the filibuster to block protection of voting rights, and right-wing judicial activism to undermine the Voting Rights Act and other pro-democracy laws adopted by Congress. What we need in response is a determined public effort, not just to guarantee that there's individual criminal accountability and justice done for the people who leveled this assault on our institutions, but to ensure that we take collective responsibility for addressing the kind of thoroughgoing assault on democratic elections that begins every election year long before the votes are counted. We need a plan to fortify American democratic institutions against future coups, insurrections, political violence, and electoral subversion. As I saw the mob approach the Capitol the day of the insurrection, I remembered a quote from Voltaire that seemed to capture for me the madness unfolding in Trump's party. Quote, "Anyone who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities," unquote. Donald Trump's big lies, QAnon conspiracy theories, Fox News disinformation, Putin's propaganda, these are the interlocking enemies of truth and democratic freedom in America. Truth and democracy are inextricably bound together. As my father, Marcus Raskin, once explained, democracy must have a ground to stand on, and that ground is the truth. But even if fighting zealously for the truth about particular attacks on democracy is urgently necessary today, and has been the animating ethos of our committee, it is also radically insufficient. The last 2 years have shown that it is far easier to identify and prosecute criminal acts that form part of an insurrection or coup than it is to identify and confront the institutional dynamics and structural conditions that set the stage for insurrectionist violence and outbreaks of extremist politics in the first place. So that is our task in the days ahead. We must fight for democracy itself. We must insist that government be the instrument of the common good rather than a money-making operation for those who can capture high office. We must debunk the insurrectionary theory of the Constitution advanced by right-wing forces contending that self-proclaimed private militias have the right to forcibly overthrow the government. We need to defend the democratic culture of truth and facts against the disinformation and conspiracy theory propounded by democracy's enemies online. When people praise our committee by saying that we are defending democracy, my colleagues and I are grateful because this is a project of which we are justly proud. But this framing leaves the misimpression that democracy is a static thing, a collection of regular institutions and practices. Democracy is partly that, but it is also much more. It is a continuing project, the always unfinished quest of linking the people with the power. Democracy is a dynamic process, not a destination, but a journey. It has always been the American journey. Lincoln spoke in lawyer-like terms of government of the people, by the people, and for the people, but he knew that we began as a slave republic of propertied white males. It has only been through successive waves of momentous social, political, and constitutional struggle that we have come closer to realizing Lincoln's tantalizing and elusive vision. If you read the Constitution the way I do, most of the 17 constitutional amendments we have added since the original Bill of Rights are democratizing amendments that have transformed us from a slave republic into a democratic one by banning slavery, the 13th Amendment, constitutionalizing equal protection and due process, the 14th Amendment, forbidding race discrimination in voting, the 15th Amendment, shifting the mode of election of U.S. senators from the legislatures to the people, the 17th Amendment, enfranchising women, the 19th Amendment, granting people in Washington, D.C. voting rights in presidential elections, the 23rd Amendment, ending poll taxes, the 24th Amendment, creating stability and order in the peaceful transfer of power, the 25th Amendment, and lowering the voting age to 18, the 26th Amendment. The struggle for a more perfect union has always been a seesaw battle. Alexis de Tocqueville observed in Democracy in Action that political democracy and voting rights in our country are always either shrinking and contracting or growing and expanding. We have been in a decidedly contractionary period. Lincoln's anti-slavery, pro-freedom, and pro-immigrant Republican Party, which worked to protect the Union, has become Donald Trump's authoritarian and paranoid cult of personality, which works to subvert the constitutional order and depress democratic participation. Although it is a minority and a shrinking minority, wrong, my word, wrong, Trump's party remains a potent threat because it has one important thing going for it: a bag of sinister tricks that all work the same way, to thwart democracy. Some of the tricks, like the voter suppression now ubiquitous in red states, choke off popular participation. Some of them, like legislative gerrymandering of state and federal districts, blockade the popular will, fracturing and dissolving political majorities and enthroning political minorities decade after decade. Other tricks, the use of the filibuster to block voting rights legislation, or the right-wing judicial activism that dismembered the Voting Rights Act in cases like Shelby County versus Holder, obstruct the workings of legislative democracy and dismantle basic legislative framework statutes that are the foundation of democratic inclusion. And the final and most dangerous trick is the unleashing of violent extremism and sabotage against public institutions at all levels when nothing else works to stop the political expression of majority rule. Our country is in a struggle between the will of the majority and the reactionary determination of the minority to impose the kind of structural chokeholds that deprive democracy of oxygen. Many of these chokeholds, like gerrymandering and the filibuster, are not built into the Constitution, but are rather improvised political practices deeply antithetical to constitutional values. The filibuster, for example, is just part of a Senate rule, and it is a tool already riddled with more than 100 exceptions, including in the Budget Reconciliation Act, the Trade Adjustment Act, and judicial nominations. If the pro-democracy party can build an effective majority in the Senate, it could carve out another exception to the filibuster for legislation affecting voting rights and democratic participation. Of course, other anti-democratic institutions are built directly into the Constitution, like the antiquated and obsolete Electoral College, which has produced presidents who lost the popular vote at least 5 times in our history, twice in this new century alone. Designed at a time before all the people's right to vote was even a serious idea, much less a reality, and before communications and transportation technology made a national vote for president feasible, the Electoral College is not only profoundly anti-democratic in essence. It also depresses turnout and political action by consigning the vast majority of Americans to safe, blue or red states that become flyover country for presidential candidates in a winner-take-all system where it is perfectly clear who is going to win in the vast majority of states long before Election Day. Surely it is time for America to leave the Electoral College behind in the same way we cast aside other anti-democratic filters in the original design, like state legislatures choosing United States senators, the disenfranchisement of women, or poll taxes as a condition for voting. We spend hundreds of millions of dollars every year promoting American political democracy to other nations, remaking their electoral institutions, and they never tell us how impressed they are by our Electoral College system or how eager they are to emulate it. The 2020 election also showed that this undemocratic and arbitrary system is dangerous because bad faith actors have learned how to strategically plant booby traps in every dark corner of its obsolete and complicated architecture. Attendance at the symbolic counting of electoral votes in the joint session of Congress, the quaint ceremony that was disrupted by a rampaging mob on January 6th, can now get you killed. It's time to elect the president the way we elect mayors, governors, senators, members of Congress, and everyone else. Every vote wins. Every vote counts, and each one counts equally, and whoever gets the most votes wins. I'm going to skip a section. The Democratic Party, the only major party in America today still standing by free and fair elections and defending the Constitution, will obviously be the political home for pro-democracy Americans for the foreseeable future. But it will have friends and allies across the political spectrum, including Republicans like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, true libertarians, Greens, and the tens of millions of independents who plan to keep the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and their pragmatic common sense of the people close to their hearts. More important, American civil society, the universities, the businesses, the labor unions, cities and towns, the free press and media, the churches and nonprofit sector, has been growing an eagerness to pick up the banner of democracy and freedom in America and to resist tyranny when it comes calling. My father used to say that when everything looks hopeless, you are the hope. And so you are, and so am I. Democracy is each of us pulling together. Most Americans passionately favor democracy, both as a set of existing practices and as a continuing pragmatic experiment in finding ways to link the people with the power. Most Americans reject MAGA appeals, whether direct or coded, to racism, anti-Semitism, misogyny, and immigrant bashing. This has been an especially hard time for young people who have little memory of any other political reality than the grim one recorded in these pages. They have been confined by COVID-19 and haunted by climate change, and they are surrounded by the politics and culture of right-wing authoritarianism. Go and organize with them, and tell them about the great changes we have seen in our lives. Tell them that prior generations of patriots have faced daunting odds and crisis in their own times. Those generations fought for democracy and freedom, and they prevailed. So will we. That's the end of the epilogue by Representative Raskin. And that's pretty much where I am and where we are, and I hope we all make it safely and prosperously through the next 4 years. As I look around me, everything's fine. I mean, I don't have anything to complain about, you know. The world outside my window's not on fire or at war. I've got a roof over my head. I'm warm. I got my comfy. I'm sure we're going to be fine. But the whole thing just feels wrong. So that's how I'm feeling. If you cared, if you made it this far, thanks for watching. Take care.